Thank you very much for inviting me to this very interesting event. If we forget the geopolitics, my country, Lebanon, looks in many ways like this beautiful part of Italy. Before jumping to the euro, I would like to take this opportunity to tell you that Lebanon's fundamentals include a very high public deficit and a high current account deficit with a ratio of debt to GDP close to 150%, 40% of which is denominated in US dollars. So when I hear European complaints, I wonder. At the same time, the EU is our first trade partner, mostly for imports, and I'm trying here to give you some indications of our exposure to the main currencies. At the same time, Lebanon has been very resilient, and its resilience has become a legend, despite permanent wars in or around the country, a very complicated environment, and an open crisis since 1975, whether at the institutional level, at the political level, wars, economics, and social issues. With now, in addition, the equivalent of 42% of the Lebanese population of Syrian refugees inside Lebanon, which is the highest level ever reached worldwide. Despite this, in an environment where Syria and Iraq are going through a terrible war, Jordan's and Egypt's economies struggling, Turkey's uncertainties increasing, Cyprus' devastating crisis not over, we are still growing, although not enough to sustain that dynamics and not enough to absorb new entrants on the job market. And like Italy, as Professor Giordano stressed earlier, our human capital is going abroad. Let me come now to the euro issue. A brief historical view shows that until the 60s, most countries in the Middle East, North Africa region had their currencies tied one way or another to the French franc and the English sterling pound, as those two countries inherited protectorates from the Ottoman Empire after its fall as a consequence of World War I. In the Mashreq, which is the eastern part of the Mediterranean, or had colonial-type presence in North Africa for a longer time and in various ways. Italy, of course, had a presence in Libya, but it was mostly the pound and the franc that were the references. The big shift did not start with the rise of the American giant, as it was still far from local economies and not yet a major trade partner. The real change started at the beginning of the 70s with the rise of oil prices. The oil-producing economies, totally and directly, and the non-oil producers, indirectly but strongly also, became, because of the flows of capital coming from oil countries, became strongly tied to the oil market. On the other hand, Middle East and North Africa countries' exports, taken all together, are mostly oil and petroleum, which trading currency is and remain the US dollar. Today, and since those days, oil exporters' currencies are all pegged to the US dollar, and most of their public revenues are oil-related anyway. The Lebanese economy, for instance, not yet a petroleum exporter, is nowadays nearly entirely dollarized, and this is an interesting example of a small open economy receiving massive inflows every year, close to 15% of its GDP. For the time being, gas exports remain relatively limited, but prospects to see them increase are good, as gas exploration and extraction is booming in the region, including in Lebanon. The offshore of the whole Levant area, i.e. Lebanon, Syria, Israel, the occupied territories, Egypt and Cyprus, in addition to Turkey, are all likely to find sizable gas reserves at the gate of Europe and perhaps oil. In Lebanon, even the onshore looks promising. From the Gulf, as you know, the gas toward Europe was supposed to go through Syria, and that was probably one of the main reasons for the unfortunate bloodshed in this country, particularly around the region of Homs, where battles are raging. The growth of gas exports toward Europe with long-term contracts in euro could eventually change the situation, but it will remain marginal in the coming decade. As for imports, despite the fact that Europe is a very important trade partner, they are coming less and less from Europe and more from Asia, where the currencies are also linked to the US dollar in various ways. Therefore, if no major changes occur, it is difficult to imagine having a major role for the euro in the region. And its weakness is even an advantage for the imports of MENA countries, for obvious reasons, and of course for Europe too. Now we've been arguing about the role of the euro that is a tool on the path of a certain policy that is never clearly stated since the beginning. The whole exercise, if I look at Europe from outside, goes toward further integration toward a big federal area. If this is clear, the euro is a must. If this is not, Europe has wasted too many decades going towards that. Should Europe as a whole face the rest of the world, or should European countries continue to face each other inside the Union? This debate has to find a facilitator. There is, of course, no 100% answer, but there is a trend to be set. If you allow me to share my feelings toward the mood and toward the Europeans' gloomy vision of the future, I'm probably going to go against the current by saying that Europe is not at all in a very bad shape. Its fundamentals remain okay, and its wealth allows for a full use of its huge potential. But where I agree is that Europe is panicking, as if it was going to disappear because of the rise of the new giants, and it is selling its advantages for immediate gains and fueling, thus, the vicious cycle. There is a higher level unwilling to decelerate its wealth accumulation and becoming greedier because it is convinced that the future is gloomy, and there is increasing inequalities, and here I share the proposal of Professor Galbraith. And this is where action, I think, should be taken immediately. Europe is facing different regimes in the world with its democratic system. It's a fantastic advantage for people to have true democracy, but it also means that their leaders have to achieve quickly before elections. Unlike their competitors, even though on the long run they have the advantage. Europe should therefore, in my modest belief, stop panicking and give itself time without giving up its competitive advantages, as it is doing now through massive technology transfers. Europe's market is huge and its competitors are quickly changing with higher labor costs, more social pressure, and many other things. So just keep cool, take it easy, stop looking at the clock all the time, and do the reforms that Europe needs instead of persistently announcing the coming of doomsday. Thank you very much.